Arc builds have dominated episode Heresy so far after the addition of Bolt Charge, and while those builds are great, I wanted to branch out and try something different than the typical Storm's Keep, Geomag, and Ascension spam. My friends recommended that I try out what is essentially the Warlock's version of Consecration, and to be honest guys, I was pretty blown away. While it may not have the raw melee power that Prismatic Titan has, it does still offer some pretty ridiculous ad clear even in Grandmaster level content, while also providing much better survivability. So today, we'll be covering what I believe is hands down one of the best endgame Warlock builds right now, and if you enjoyed today's video, a like and subscription is greatly appreciated. Now without further ado, let's get into it. So let's start with the basics of the build. First things first, we'll be using Song of Flame to not only ego bosses with 90% damage resist, but we'll be pairing it with Facet of Purpose to give us restoration every time we pick up an Orb of Power. You can swap Song of Flame for other supers if you'd like, but our super choice is going to make a lot more sense as we dive into my recommended weapons later in the video. Next up, we have Phoenix Dive, which is by far my favorite class ability. It has a significantly shorter cooldown than both the healing and empowering rifts, and has almost an instant activation that can definitely save you if you're truly desperate. For our melee, we're gonna go with Arcane Needle, which fills the exact same role that Frenzied Blade does for Consecration, giving us 3 powered melee charges that can be used to spam Lightning Surge, which will be our first aspect of choice here. While sliding, Lightning Surge transforms your powered melee attack into a ranged AoE melee lunge that calls down 5 lightning bolts from the sky and now grants a stack of Bolt Charge for every enemy that you hit, while simultaneously jolting enemy targets. This deals pretty substantial damage on its own, but when we pair this with a Syntheseps exotic class item, the build goes to the next level. You literally don't need any other perk. Obviously, things like Spirit of Assassin or Spirit of Inmost would be great here, but I'm quite literally rocking a perk that does nothing for me with this build, and it's still absolutely incredible. So hopefully that eases your minds a bit regarding this build's accessibility. The footage you're watching in the background was all taken in last week's Grandmaster Nightfall, and I have to say, it was stupidly fun to use. It not only ad clears well, but the survivability elements are honestly up there with some of the best. It may not match the stronghold nonsense I've been seeing on my timeline, but you're also not holding the block button constantly, which means you're way more efficient at killing ads. This leads me to our next aspect, Feed the Void. This grants Devour every time we secure an ability kill, which, as you can imagine, is happening all the time. You use your initial melee charge, gather Transcendence energy, pop Transcendence, go crazy with unlimited abilities, come out of Transcendence with 3 melee charges, go crazy with ad clear again. I think you get the point. This build gives you a constant loop of your most powerful abilities, which means we'll have Devour active whenever we need it, with Restoration layered on top of that every time we pick up an Orb of Power, thanks to our first fragment, Facet of Purpose, as I mentioned earlier. We'll then pair this with Facet of Protection, which grants an additional 20% damage resist when we're surrounded by enemy combatants, which should be active pretty much all the time, seeing that this build is so up close and personal. Next up, we have Facet of Balance, which grants melee energy when rapidly defeating enemies with light damage, and grenade energy when rapidly defeating enemies with dark damage. This is extremely valuable for our build because Arcane Needle is actually converted to light damage when using Lightning Surge, which means our charged melee ability is constantly feeding itself energy for the next attack. We don't care too much about the grenade regen portion of this fragment, as the Cold Snap, which is my personal grenade of choice here, is only really used to stun unstops or freeze the occasional priority target. We'll then pair this with Facet of Dawn, which synergizes perfectly with Lightning Surge as it grants us Radiant on charged melee hits, giving us intrinsic anti-barrier capabilities and 15% bonus damage to our weapons. The last fragment is all personal preference, but I went with Facet of Hope to improve the regen of our Phoenix dive while we have an active elemental buff, such as Devour, Restoration, Bolt Charge, and Amplified, which as you can imagine, again, is happening all the time. Now before we dive into armor mods, I'm going to showcase the loadout I've been using that should pretty much help you speedrun any GM this season, with maybe the exception of a few super long range nightfalls. First up, we have Tanasha's Mastery. This weapon comes from Iron Banner and is the creme de la creme of endgame utility this episode. It not only works with anti-barrier sidearm from the artifact, it also instantly stuns overloads with the slow from Chill Clip and can even freeze and shatter unstops on successive hits. This really opens up your loadout to kind of run whatever you want. And one weapon that people are seriously sleeping on in GMs right now is Lord of Wolves. This weapon was recently buffed with the recent changes to its non-ADS damage and rate of fire, and it absolutely shreds GM level enemies. It was overcharged shotgun here, but keep in mind that I had no weapon surges on, which means you could easily replicate this in other nightfalls, whether it be putting on surges or waiting for solar surge to be active during the rotation. It is the perfect pairing with this build due to how much damage resist and healing we have at close range, and allows us to absolutely melt them while Song of Flame is active, as it basically makes us immune to damage. In the heavy slot, I highly recommend a Strand Machine Gun for longer ranged ad clear that will also help feed the darkness portion of your Transcendence bar. And now that we've covered our loadout, let's dive into the armor mods. First up, on the helmet, we're going with hands-on to gain bonus super energy on melee kills, and we'll pair this with Dynamo to reduce our super cooldown when using Phoenix Dive near enemy targets. On the gauntlets, the most essential mod here is easily heavy-handed, which generates orbs of power each time we secure a powered melee kill. This means every time we use Lightning Surge, we'll not only proc Devour, we'll also be proccing Restoration as well. I often go with weapon loaders in my other two slots, but if you want more ability regen, I definitely recommend Impact Induction and Momentum Transfer here. On the chest piece, simply use the resists that are the most beneficial to the activity that you're in, and on the boots, I recommend Recuperation to give you a burst of healing every time we pick up an Orb of Power. This may seem redundant with Devour, but keep in mind that Devour was nerfed and no longer fully heals you. So Recuperation basically takes it back to its pre-nerf levels of healing. I also went with Absolution to reduce all ability cooldowns when picking up Orbs of Power, and a Solar Scavenger to keep Lord of Wolves topped up on ammo as much as possible. And lastly, on the class item, I went with Outreach to help reduce melee cooldowns when using our class ability, Powerful Attraction to pick up nearby Orbs of Power when using our class ability, and Special Finisher to help sustain our double special loadout. This all combines for a build that will help you speed farm endgame content, whether you're farming GMs with a fire team or just want a solo build that can easily take care of all three champions and do it in a way that's not only fun, but extremely reliable and powerful as well. Well guys, that's gonna do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. And as always, the dim links to this build can be found down in the description below. I'd also love to see you guys join us over in the live streams over at twitch.tv/above, where we'll be playing tons of D2 and party games like Repo this week, so make sure to swing on by the stream. Anyways, that's it from me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace!